This week, for the final week of the Postmaster class, is a bonus lecture because we've already covered all the basics of poses with the form and the perspective and the stickman process and the important muscles and bones. You have all the pieces you really need. Hopefully, I've explained them well enough to actually start making sense and practicing. That is going to be the really important part at this point. If you feel like you're lagging and not getting anywhere, you might be stuck in what some people call tutorial hell, where you're just watching tutorials, but you're not actually practicing because they go hand in hand. You have to have your fundamentals and your technicals, and you need to actually sit down and draw. Because if you don't actually practice the connection between your brain and your hand and putting it into application, you are not going to progress. And that is just the uncomfortable. So, with that out of the way, this is going to be a fun one where I'm going to talk about how you take these references, all these human pictures, and make them anime because there's a good chance you people, us, are kind of into anime, and anime is not really the same as people, right? I know, big surprise, right? So let's jump into it here, starting with faces. Because in drawing anime, bodies are pretty similar. I'm going to get into bodies towards the end of this, but the main determining factor of anime is the head and the face, especially when you get into more advanced pictures. You see, some people will do very detailed, realistic, almost kind of like more show offy human bodies where all the proportions are right and all the muscles are there, and then they'll just have an anime face all of a sudden. And that's why we're going to start here on the girl faces. In fact, actually, if I were to say like what's anime, anime is just eyes and hair, and then we ignore the mouth and we ignore the nose. Pretty much, that's all it is, right? Everything else is pretty similar to drawing human bodies. Here, so starting off, um, I have here a front and a side view of a woman, and right over here I have. Oh, that's not the. That's a dude. Right, we have the proportions anime head. What I want to do is start by pointing out the differences in the proportions. Down, let's turn it off here. And let's put these to a head. This one, five, perfect. Try and line her up here. Right? We'll use the chin as our guide and the top of the head. You can kind of see how they line up. It looks pretty ridiculous, right? That look kind of obvious to people here. Right? You can see it's just the eyes are very big in anime. And so, like I said, when you're doing anime and turning humans into anime, the biggest factors are going to be eyes, hair, and then turning down all of the realism on the nose and the mouth. Because I mean, do you like look at anime even like back in the really early days of anime, like the '80s, where they hadn't really like locked in that really traditional style that we have nowadays, where everything looks kind of the same. Noses like were really small back then. I think the most extreme noses I can remember is like Astro Boy, where they did have some big noses. Um, Berserk kind of gets into more realistic noses, but even then, it's really downplayed. And the reason for that is if you take like a human face and you just, for instance, crank that, and we're going to do a little trick here where we go to posterize on top here. If you turn down the values of the human face to like the absolute minimum, where there's just a couple values, you can see here her nose is pretty much just this little shape like this. It's very, very light. It's you don't really see all the there's none of these like bulbous elements where you see all the different parts of it. And that's what anime is doing, is it's just doing an impression for the nose and then an impression for the mouth. And that brings us back to our main focus, eyes and hair. And then of course next, which is just talking about deleting everything accidentally. Oh, oh, maybe we don't need it. Okay. So eyes and hair. So what's the process then? How do we go from this lovely human girl over here and its reference that we adore? We love this reference, but how do we turn it into this over here? Well, the first thing you got to do, and this gets into kind of caricature work where you need to sort of think about what are the defining elements of a face. This is if you specifically want to draw an anime character that looks like a human being or a specific person. Is this is before you even put down your proportions or put down any other features or lines, is looking at it and understanding what you can and can't work with. So we know if we're doing anime, her nose and her mouth are not going to be super important because we can't draw them if we're going to play in the style of anime. That leaves two big elements. I've said hair and eyes. Those are your defining features in anime. Those are where you get to play. That's where you get to sell things. So let's go through the process. We'll do this nice and light so you can kind of watch me work over top of it. If you're not comfortable drawing faces in anime, just start with a circle. I'm just going to do a little cheat here in Photoshop, but I'm sure everyone's got cheats in Procreate and Clip Studio and whatever software you like, right? Start with a circle. Go to the center of the head and draw a line. Just a loose line like that. A little lighter. And then what you want to do, as you see, I have these little handy proportion things over here. Watch, I'll make these a little darker so you can see what, hey, there's 8. Horrible 8. Okay. So when you're doing a female anime head, this one's going to catch you off guard. This upper circle here is actually gigantic. But we don't notice it because most of it will get covered in hair. But when you do these layouts, remember that this ball up top is like 2/3 of the overall head. Like what I did, you could even make even bigger. I like to go on the smaller side because I've done so many human references that it just looks bizarre to me, and I will just draw the hair out here. But you could get away with a bigger head if you just want to draw the hair again. Keeping that in mind, then we go to the next step about after realizing that anime girl heads are really, really contorted. We want to go, so like if we break this in half, circle, take one of these lengths and then go that much further down for her chin. You could even go less than, like if you want to do like a really cute character, the chin's even less. The more you bring the chin up, the cuter the character. Like if I could do it like this, and suddenly it looks kind of like a chibi head, doesn't it? Right? And that's how you really push the cuteness of anime characters, is you bring the chin up. But if we're just doing like a regular adult, 18, 20-year-old plus anime girl, generally about 1/3 of your head, of your overall length, is where the chin starts. So that's about there, right? Right about there. And then you bring it in like so. And it's this, what you're doing is there's a slight curve in initially, and that's for the side of the jaw. And then you want to have kind of a slight line like this, and then you bring it in to the chin itself. So this one is cheek, this one here is the bottom of the jaw, and this here is the like forward part of the jaw. But you don't do this for the actual jaw. These are very, very subtle curves to the line. So you can see here, I kind of come in a little bit, light curve, and then bring it in. Very, very subtle changes in line. And this brings me back to my point of why it's important to practice, because if you don't practice, you will not have the ability to actually move your hand in these ways and make nice, pretty lines with slight hints of contour to them that really sell good anime. So back to other side, right? If you're not feeling like you can do these kinds of things yet, you can just come straight down and do a light straight curve into the center of the jaw, right? You don't have to get that fancy. It kind of comes into like almost a personal preference. But on like really, when you're looking at advanced artists, they tend to do this kind of curve with the jaw. Very, very subtle. All right, other side, right? Bring it in. And then anime girl next. Generally, you can go from like where the middle of the eye would be, lay it in. I haven't done the eyes yet, but you can see where they are in the underlying bit. So with this, we have our general head shape. And you can lay in her nose right around this point, which is between the midline and where the circle would be. So, you can put a nose in here. Let's erase this for now. Turn this down. We know that's there. Boom, and then the mouth is about in between these two spaces on an anime girl. And when you do anime mouths, back to the point of where it's all impression, if you look at anime mouths, they're really like two just little lines. Sometimes they're one line, but they're really, really subtle. You'll see anime girls like, looking to the side real quick, and then it's the mouth right there. It's like nothing. It's like a piece of dust fell on the screen. And so you really can't work with mouths too much when you're doing anime caricatures and taking reference turning into it. You can from a stylistic perspective, but if you're doing traditional, I'm drawing 2015 anime, you don't have much to play with on your nose. So that one, of course, as always, in all art, caveat, there's always personal preferences and styles, but I'm showing you traditional Crunchyroll anime. Right. Ears. Your ears. Let's do the eyes, or the eyes first, because you use the eyes as a landmark. So now we get to the big scary part where a lot of people tend to get a little lost, and that is the eyes. Eyes are a little hard to place in anime, especially when we come at it from a traditional, I call a human perspective, because as humans, we like to put a lot of emphasis on facial features because they're important to us, right? When you talk to another human being, you're communicating, there's a lot of information we get from how their eyes are being used, right? We're like, you tell if someone's annoyed, if they're angry, if they like you, if they're bored, right? There's a lot of information that we get from people's faces. And so when new artists draw faces, they tend to really overemphasize and overthink these features because they're so important to us psychologically. And so something you really have to work on as you learn how to draw any kind of face, whether it's anime or realistic or some third option, is to stop caring so much about the facial features. Don't get precious and just kind of follow the general guidelines of where things should go. And I promise it'll make the process a lot more fluid. You don't want to get up there and just like constantly erasing and like, oh, that's not right. And then you erase it and you're like, that's not right. And you erase it. You just kind of get less precious and just plot things in. Light shape, move on. So as far as the placement, with that in mind, don't get precious. Your eyes are going to be on an anime girl. If you take that original circle we had, go about halfway. The eyes sit in the lower portion of this area. This is our area. The eyes tend to sit down around here, right? Again, varies a lot in style. Like if you look at 90s anime, their eyes are probably the biggest they ever really get, where they're almost half the face. And that's usually where you get all those memes about really big anime girl eyes, is from all those 90 ones. Like, what would be a good example? Sailor Moon. Yeah, I was about to think, I was going to say Sailor Moon, but then I was like, can't remember exactly, but I remember Sailor Moon being very large eyes. Or what else was big in the 90s? Card Captors, Inuyasha. The eyes are really big in those characters. And they got toned down a bit as we got into more modern animes. And so, as far as general placement, style aside, as always, like the eternal caveat of art, ignore people's personal styles and preferences. You take the eye and you make kind of an almond shape, right? If an almond, I guess, looks kind of like this, an actual almond, right? You're going to do something kind of like that, but you want to cut out this section right here and do more like that. Just kind of create a little more, it's almost like kind of a, maybe an almond. People use the word almond to describe it, but it looks more like a sunglasses lens to me, but that's not super helpful. You'll just kind of learn the shape over time. Generally, you have a long curve, a short curve for the bottom, and then you do these like two joining, right? That's generally the shape of an eye. And then you do an eyebrow over top, and then a big eye, right? And then she's like, just, there's a whole, I could do a whole lesson on just anime eyes themselves, because the amount of thought people put into anime eyes is just ridiculous. It's kind of funny. Like you can see, you can just keep working it. More dots here and there, maybe a little spot there. Oh my god, look at this crazy anime eye. And you can make like the lashes super crazy, and there's all this crap coming off it, and it's just anime, man. It's a fun genre. So, back to the placement. And I know I'm getting distracted by doing like an eye lesson now, because honestly, an eye lesson is anime. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. Distracted. Deep breath. Focus. Anyway, so we take that ship I was talking about, and you want to go, like I said, in the lower area of these places plotted, right? So you come down a little lower, and if you're in a digital program, luckily you can kind of play around with it and just create, like I said, that longer top curve, that shorter bottom curve, loose lines, and then just connect them, right? And same thing over here. Right? Just the loose idea of lines. Because you're doing reference from a character, you really can't do much yet. This is just kind of laying out the foundations of an anime head. Fire. And if you feel like your eyes are off after you've put them in, there's a really good chance you've put them too close together. Because there should be about one eye length or eye width, say, between the two eyes. Like if you look at my thing here, there's actually about an eye in between them. Anime characters tend to have almost kind of fishy eyes where they're really, really close to the sides of the head. Whereas compared, if you look at like a human face over here, right? And if I draw her eyes out, you'll see it follows the same eye rule. Like there's about an eye in between the eyes. There's also about like another half an eye to the side of the head, but even though, there's gonna be some side of the head here. Real humans actually have smaller eyes than we tend to think, which is a portrait thing, but we won't get into actual human portraiture because we're drawing anime. Anime characters, they have huge fish-like side of the head eyes. And so if ever you feel like your eye placement is a little off, you might want to try and err more towards the side than towards the center. Because this is usually what happens. 9 times out of 10, when I'm seeing people doing art that they're not confident about, they're making this mistake where the eyes are too close to the center and they have to pull them out more. Because it feels kind of counterintuitive to us when we're drawing a face to put the eyes so far out. We want to put them towards the center where eyes are important to us, and so we tend to put them really close towards the center line. That doesn't look like anime. So, at this point, let's see. Your ears tend to sit about between the top of your eye and the bottom of your nose. So we'll just block in some ears. And that's a general anime face, right? We've just gone through the general framework here. This is the same for almost every female face. These same kind of plots will work for the profile as well from the side. And once you're at this point, you can start to think about actually drawing from the reference itself. Because now we can actually pull some of the more defining elements that show us this is her face, right? That's only, of course, that's if you want to. I see. If you want to do caricatures and draw from reference, or turn a human being, like say you want to do one of your own, you take a photo of yourself and you want to make it anime, this is where you can start to play. So let's make a new layer. Where are the ears? Oh, there's the ears. Wonder I can't find the ears. And we look at our face over here, and what are the big features? We see a big swoop in her hair, right? And it kind of comes out like that. And then it comes in, right? And it kind of does this. And you can see that kind of classic sort of opening in the hair that's in a lot of anime. Right? I would just take that, put it right over here, make it a little bit bigger. And yeah, it's a boot, right? And you can see there's that space I was talking about between the top of the head and the hair. Anime girls got big hair. And this goes back to my point of whether you draw a really big starting circle and want to account for the hairline, or a smaller circle because you just think it looks weird. I'm in the latter company, but either direction is totally cool. Whatever gets you the result right. And then another defining feature we see here is her eyebrows kind of do this sort of little down, right? You can kind of see the little down. And that's really about it, right? So we go over to our eyes here. We put the little eye lines. I'm going to do like a little bit down like this. Put down because it's just caricature, so you can't take it too seriously. You're just finding like 1 to 3 really defining elements of a person and just capturing the vector. It's more like a kind of like that shape. Yeah. So, oops. But she looks a little too pissed off, doesn't she? Just stick it like probably gonna get. And then she's got some smoky eye thing going on. You would steal her eye color, right? Another big thing that sells people. Oh, this person is the hair color and the eye color. So if I go over here, like there's some big pretty lashes. Big pretty lashes. You can kind of see it's sort of starting to resemble her as an anime character. Plot in these a little more. You can also use jaw lines to help do caricatures or references, but not too much in anime. Anime is really kind of cookie cutter, especially these days. It's been done so much where everyone just kind of knows what anime is supposed to look like. Actually, she's got eyes that are sort of a little higher. Got little narrow. Close her eyes a little bit. Something like that. Yeah, and so there's kind of a general process of turning a human being into anime. And then we're gonna that's the slow version. Hopefully everyone's does that process made sense so far? Yeah, and there's a lot going on when you do portraits, so I want to make sure I didn't go too fast. I'll go through the process and like the general steps right now. First, lay out your square or your circle. Pardon, I already said the wrong thing, right? You lay out your general anime framework for a girl, right? Circle. You do your midline. Chin goes, right? Then I like to put a line here. And here's your nose, mouth, eyes go here, right? Eyes, and following the top of the eyes and the nose, draw in some ears. And at this point, you have your framework. Then, if you're doing a reference, look at major features like the shape of the hair, the shape of the eyes, and shape of the eyelashes. And then just kind of modify things a little bit, right? They just tweak little by little, right? So she's got the downward eyes. We established that. She's got this big swoopy hair thing going on, right? It comes down. Big swoopy, right? And you're just kind of accentuating things. And that's how you turn people into anime. Does that clarify things a little bit with like real quick step by step? Yes, no? Did that go through? Hello? Did the feed turn off? Okay. Hello? Is it still going through? Oh, I thought it crapped. Okay. Sorry. Thought it crapped out. It made a bunch of weird little flickering things. Okay. So did that quick little process help make it nice and clear in your heads how you turn humans into anime? Okay. Okay, good. So with that, we'll get into some quick versions where we're going to do a profile of a woman and then go over guys' faces and the little differences there. And then we'll go into the small ideas of simplifying bodies, because the body part's not that different. Usually the difference between real life and anime is entirely the heads. 9 times out of 10, it's the heads. And so this whole thing is going to be talking about heads, and faces. So there's a quick one. So using our little process here, let's talk about side profiles for women. And I see Ignis is popping in and out, so hopefully they figure out what's going on. Right, so first things first. Draw a, say it with me, a circle. Right? Thank you. Perfect. Up. And midline. This one just comes straight off the circle. I see a bunch of stuff popping off here. What is all this ticky-tacky, boopy-beepy? What is this? Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Bunch of messages just popped up on Discord. All right, so we put the circle down. We all said the word circle together. Great, cool. I like to put a midline in the middle of the circle here, because this is usually your guideline for where to put the jaw and the ear, which are really helpful landmarks. And so from here, you can just put this line out to about a third of the circle. Remember I was talking about if you take a circle, I know there's all these guidelines. If you take this, right, about there, and I take this and I put it down here, and I go about a third down, it's actually even shorter. Yeah, anime girls have no jaws. Right, that's actually too short. Then we'll put her jaw down here. Yeah, I tell you, man. You actually sit down to like try and measure things out, and then you look at it like, that doesn't look right. It's because anime girls have these huge, huge heads. I sometimes actually will think about, like, I'll just ignore this top half entirely, and you'll just start from here. Because this part you can just kind of eyeball with the hair, and just sort of like, I'll put a big pile of hair on her, and it'll just cover the rest of her face, and you just think from the bottom down. So you can like take this bottom half, because profile is sometimes catch people off guard for anime, because it's kind of weird. It really contorts things, because if you look at the real face, right, and I tried to find a really neutral human face, you can see that this section sticks out quite a bit from a normal human face, and just kind of has this existence out here. Whereas if you look at anime profiles, it kind of does something more like this, where it sort of tucks in underneath the head. Yeah, because hers doesn't line up here. And so like if this was an anime character, from her eye, the chin would be like here. As you can see there, it does that. And so what you want to do when you take human faces from the side is you want to take their general profile and then kind of turn it this way, where this part comes out and this part comes in. And so instead of getting this, you get that. But you take the general line, right, and then you kind of twist it a little bit. Got to twist it in your head. Yeah, I've seen a lot of those cat memes, and that is very true. And if you look at a cat, cats don't have a very strong jaw. Even though like a big jaw is a very defining feature of human heads, we just kind of have big jaws and very long skulls compared to most animals, because a lot of animals have like, long snouts, and we just have this like little box of a skull. And so when you're doing portraiture, big jaws, very important. But when you're doing anime, we're just drawing cats with people features. Exactly. And so back to over here, you want to sort of, like, the general shape is like this. This is the general shape, right? You get this kind of the nose, and then a curve kind of like this for the mouth area, and then it comes in to where the bottom of the jaw and the ear joint would be. It always kind of reminds me of like the bottom of a knight's helmet, because they kind of have those, like those big, it's like a big chunk of metal where it's like this, and then it just has the rest of the helmet. And anime characters always kind of remind me of knights. Maybe that'll help you, maybe it won't. That's how I tend to think about it. So back to the measurement stuff. Where was I? Right, the circle. You come down a little ways here to where the bottom of the jaw is. This part, come into this midline where your ear is, right? And then there's that shape I was talking about. You just come out, connect it, right? And you can then refine it. Or like maybe I want her nose to come up really high. Maybe I want her nose to come down really low, whatever it is here. Hers, if I'm doing a portrait, is not an upturned nose. It's a very neutral nose. So you can just follow the general swoop I was talking about. Bring this in a bit. And then she has... her lips come down a bit. That's not important. These are pretty close. Right, so lips a little higher. That's it. Her mouth comes down a bit. You could probably put a little bit more of a... It's kind of a stronger nose. You can probably come out a little bit harder. Right? Neck. Let's turn off the guide because it's cheating. So, eyes from the side. This is a fun part of anime. So a lot of times what I'll see people do is they'll kind of draw like a regular eye. Right? And then they'll just put that there. And that's not how eyes work from the side. I see that one a lot too. Eyes really catch people up in anime because they're just sort of weird. So that shape, what I just did, makes sense for a caricature of an eye from the front, right? You do this. There's your eye. But if you look at a real human in their eye, they don't have the same shape from the side. And that's because how the eye works is, you have to think about the overall structure of an eye, is you have the eyeball itself, right? And then from, let's do 3/4, there's an eyelid over top, sits on it, right? And then one underneath it like this. That's how the eye actually exists. And so if we take this and we look at it from the side, if we rotate it, what you're going to get is going to get that eyeball. All right, it's looking out at you, it's looking at stuff, and then there's these lids over top, right? Your eyelashes, blah, blah, blah. That's how an eye sits from the side. And so when you think of an anime eye in its extreme proportions, we draw like an anime eye, right? And you can kind of think of it almost like there's a lid up here. There's a lid down here, even though the lids are not accentuated at all, but you can kind of think of it that way. When you turn it sideways, you're going to get a big lash, and then this little lash on the bottom, and the eye kind of does this. You want to actually think about how you rotate an anime eye in space. So something more like this is what you see more professional artists do when they draw anime eyes. Is it's almost like that. That's like the really simple version. Is like a little triangle almost, and then make the eye go wherever you want to go. Yeah, that is a really, you could just kind of foreshorten it. It's being rotated in space. And so when you come over to your buddy here, instead of doing this, which is what you normally see, in this area, you can play with the placement. Usually a little bit in here, right? And you just want to lock it in, and then that's pretty much your eye. Yeah, so you just want to do this kind of shape like that because you're seeing an eye from the side. Now, again, anime is not, of course, accurate. It's a cartoon. And so you're not going to get really specific about where the eyelids are or where, how the eyebrows sit or the actual, like, I guess you call it the inside of the eyes because the eyes sit kind of in that, like a little pocket in the skull. I think it's called the orbital bone, something like that. I don't know. And so we're going to pretend that this is a very accurate human skull. Because if you think of like an actual, like a skull from the side, this is how the hole looks, right? Does this. I did that too close to the side. Like if I draw a skull, right? It does this. right? Even though from the front on a skull, you're going to see like these big shapes like this, right? But of course, as it was pointed out, when you turn it, it foreshortens, and so that's how much of the eyeball we actually see is like this. It covers up, and so it's the same on this, right? Your eyeball kind of pokes out, and then you have your eyelashes. But because it's anime, we exaggerate, and so we come up with the eyelash a little more, come down with that side bit. There's some of that, and then we bring in the actual eye a little bit. So that's how you draw eyes from the side. And depending on your character, or if you're doing portraiture, you can change this part a little bit. Generally, you want to have your eye, again, towards the lower portion of this area. It kind of sits down here in this lower part. And then have your eye in line with your chin, more or less. And if you follow those two guidelines, you'll usually put your eye in a good spot. Fancied up a bit, right? We're gonna, I have so much random eye stuff here. Let's turn this off. There, okay. And at this point you have, oh, sorry, she's an ear. The ear again, about top of the eye, bottom of the nose, right? There's your landmarks for your ear. It's from the side. There it is. I see ears placed in the wrong place all the time, where like it'll be too far back or too far forward. The ear goes along the middle of that ball of the skull. Right? So, and you can make bigger ears, smaller ears. You can make elf ears, right? Oh, look, she's an elf now. Cool. That's neat. We're going to do a nice human one. We don't want to freak anybody out just yet. And with your general anime face drawn in, now you can go and look at the features. And we see she's got kind of a curved eyebrow, and her hair is doing this kind of up thing. Unfortunately, I picked one that was really black, so you can't really see what the most of her hair is doing, but this is the most important part, is that little swoopy. If you do that swoopy and make her hair looks like it's kind of black hair, people are going to go like, okay, yeah, that's this person. Because you don't need too many features to sell people, right? So right around here, got her kind of eyebrow, and then we do the big swoop, bring it down the outside, and that is pretty much, she's got a little bit, we kind of have our person there, don't we? Yeah. And I'll say it again, because this is the part that really I got to beat into people's heads. When you do any kind of human reference to anime, if you look at it objectively for what it is, an anime face has very limited features and looks nothing like a human being. Like, side by side, when you pull all of your own psychological bias out and you look at it side by side, it's like these are not very similar. And you don't actually have too many pieces to play with when you turn humans into anime, because there's such a constraining idea of what anime is supposed to look like as an art style. Oh, pardon. And so you have to be really selective and aware of what elements are going to tell people that this is that person. So once again, it's going to be your hair shape, your hair color. You can modify your eye shape a little bit, if like they have narrow eyes or bigger eyes, right? But the eye is already so exaggerated in anime, you can't really play with that too much. You can play with eyelashes a little bit, but not too much. Eye color is a big one. And eyebrows are really helpful for selling people on this person. And then you can play with, like, you know, nose shape a little bit, jaw shape a little bit, but not too much. You have a lot more room when you draw anime men, because just men, like, the problem with women and female faces is if you push things too hard, it starts to look, of course, more defined and less, I guess, soft. And then our brains start going, those are male features, right? Because that's the real big difference between female and male features in our brains, is female features are very soft and round and subtle compared to male features. And so a lot of this, because we just did the female heads, you can probably even almost throw out the window when you do male heads, because you can make male jaws gigantic if you want. You can make them huge, lumpy noses. You can make weird eye shapes. Men can be a little ugly. That's just the fun part of doing male features. But with that said, these are the females. Does the process make sense for turning a human into an anime character for a female? This is resonating, it's clicking, everyone's on the same page. Yeah, singing up top, beautiful. So let's jump into men, and these will be a little quicker because we've gone over the process already. I have these guidelines. You can watch it lock in. Here, these are you can get these in the free resources in the Discord if you want. I have them there for everybody. I made them so they're nice and defined and easy to work with. And we're going to do, here, let's turn this down just for guides. So you can just see how you would work over top of them. Okay, so we start with our circle. Boom. Draw your line. Boom. Male heads. Half the head can be jaw, right? Whereas in women, the whole head, maybe only like if this was a girl head, you'd only come down to about here. Because about a third of the whole head is going to be the jaw for the women. And for dudes, this of course comes down to like how masculine you want the guy to look. The bigger the jaw, the more T we assume he has, right? We can go even higher, and we're going to get into like Giga Chad territory where it's just like this monster jaw. And he is just a big, manly man. See? You can make the jaw huge, and it still sells for dudes. But we're going to do a regular guy, because we're drawing from this fellow over here, and he's not too crazy on the Giga Chad scale. Just a normal, regular guy doing normal, regular guy stuff. And his jaw is a little thinner, but we're not going to worry about that too much. So bring this in. Right, yeah, we'll make his jaw a little more narrow, because he kind of has a narrow jaw. This comes down a little low. Right? You'll start, the more you do this, the better you'll get at actually pulling out the features of people and seeing how their faces are shaped, because his jaw is kind of on the narrow side. Let's bring it in a little more, right? A little more like that. There we go. And then it's the same proportions when you do a male face for a female face when you're putting in the nose and the mouth. This area is where the nose goes for a man. You can see I picked one that was kind of on the bigger side, but to show how you would do the caricature. So you can go for a male face in anime, you can go full on and just draw his nose, because we don't care if men are kind of lumpy, right? Or you can tone it down too. In this case, we're going to do a little bit wider. Just put a slight curve to his nose, right? We're going to bring it out, make it a little bit on the bigger side, because he's got kind of a wide nose. And then between here and here, halfway, as the same thing as the girls, that's where the mouth goes, right? He's got kind of a little curve to his mouth, right? And then up top, right, take our circle. We have this area here and here. Towards the bottom is where the eyes go. It's the same thing for dudes, but with guys, you make smaller eyes, because we also associate eye size with, it's this idea called neoteny, where adults retain childlike features. Anime girls have very childlike proportions, where it's very big eyes and very small chins. That's probably why we think they're so darn cute, is because they have actually proportions of like a baby or a cat, right? The smaller you make the eyes, the more mature we assume the individual is. Also, it's also another trick to make us think that something is bigger. When you make smaller eyes, we think that animal, or in this case a man, is a larger creature. And so like if this is just totally aside, like if I make some, I don't know, this big monster thing, right? Just this big thing, it's off in the distance, you know, whatever. I give it really small eyes, it looks bigger to us, right? Whereas if I give it big eyes, it looks smaller to us. And that's just a, yeah, I know. So, but like if maybe I'll draw a little cleaner character, right? If I just draw like an actual person. Smaller eyes makes things look a little bit bigger as an overall form. Like we assume this is maybe a larger person, versus if they were bigger eyes, right? It looks like a smaller person. And that's just because it's the relationship of the eye size Exactly. And so the eye size is one thing we could do to help sell how big something is. Like if we want to do a big, strong male character, you want to give him smaller eyes because then he looks like he's a much more developed adult person. Whereas vice versa, if I want to look more childish, I give him bigger eyes. And that's just a little eye tip there. So the eye shape for guys is the same thing. You have that kind of upper bit and that lower bit, and they connect. The difference with male eyes versus female eyes is male eyes are thinner and more narrow generally, whereas girls have much more open, childlike eyes. See, there it is, right? So, same thing with the guy. Lower portion here, just plot it in. Plot it in. He's actually got bigger eyes. He has very soft, beautiful features. What a beautiful man. Yeah. Just double that over. If you're in digital, don't be afraid to just copy your eyes over once you put one in. It's a great sheet to make things look consistent. Well, that comes back to this point here. Make sure there's an eye in between your two eyes of distance. That's a pretty consistent way to put your eyes down. Whatever shape you make your eye, just like if I, let's just here. We'll just take this one out and let's turn him off, and let's give him, I don't know, really long, narrow eyes, right? If I were to take that and just we'll put this one over here, right? Let's say my eyes are kind of, I'm having a hard time placing them, right? They're too far apart. That looks too far apart, right? What you can do is just take your eye and just put them here. Hold on, slapping around here. Or actually, could you explain to me how your eyes might look different or why they look wrong to make sure I'm actually, because I just realized I can go in different directions with this. So tell me what you're doing wrong and see if I can't fix it for you. Are you drawing? So when you say one eye looks better than the other, are your faces looking straight at the camera or are they slightly turned? And one looks better than the other after you copy it? Mm-hmm. And you've copied the eye over? And it looks better. Or one looks better than the other. Well, that probably comes down to placement. What might be happening is if you're, back to our little eyes here. So let's make a really pretty eye. Right, we're gonna just gussy this fella up. That's way too gussied. Right, we do that. I don't know, nice small. Right, dress it up. Right, so we have our eye. That's a nice, strong male eye. You're saying you make a big, pretty eye like this, and you put it over to the other side, and it looks terrible. Yeah, so it's probably that you're putting it in the wrong spot. Probably what's happening. You're probably doing something like where it just looks off like that, probably. Where like the placement is probably slightly off. And so, see, the problem with this is that's the kind of thing you just have to develop through sense and practice because. And I know I'm giving you guys proportions, but there is a lot of play in art, and this is kind of why I wasn't really sure if I should even really talk about the proportions too much, because there's just a certain sense of when something looks right or not once you've done this enough. where it's almost like you just kind of know. It's an intuition kind of thing. And so as much as I talk about, you just have to practice, because as much as I can say to draw like a female head, draw a circle, draw a line in the middle. About a third of the head should be the nose, mouth, jaw portion, but you can play with that stuff a lot, right? And so that's really good at the I'm starting out beginner level. It's really consistent for a lot of heads, but what you really want to think about in a more holistic sense is, as you practice, you'll start to kind of learn how all the pieces should talk to each other, because that's what really sells to people that this is a man, this is a woman, this is an angry person, this is a depressed person, is how everything on the face relates to other parts of the face, right? How my nose relates to my mouth, relates to my chin, relates to the jaw shape, relates to the eyes. The whole thing together tells me the story. And that's kind of the but I know that's complicated and it takes a lot of practice. And I want to give you guys something to work with right off the bat. But just know that as you do these things, a lot of the rules and proportions that I'm telling you are not actually consistent, and a lot of the time they will not hold true. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, so it's like it's almost like, that's a good example. Think of like a gymnast doing like really complex flips, right? If you're like watching the Olympics and you watch some girl do this tumbling routine and she does these insane, I don't know, I think they're called corkscrews, but she does like 5 flips in the air, like how do you even get to that level? Because your goal is to get to that really advanced level of art, right? Where you're very confident and you can do something equivalent to 5 flips in the air, but when you're drawing. And you start with, of course, you have to start small. Start with like a single front flip, right? And when you work with these proportions and these guidelines and these tutorials, it's kind of like learning the front flip. It's nowhere near the same as doing like 5 twisty 180s in the air, right? But you have to start somewhere and just keep building on it little by little until the thing you're doing, the advanced version, doesn't look anything like the basic version. But because you have that proper framework and foundation and you've built on it really methodically, you can get to that really advanced level where you don't need front flips anymore, because you can just do the really crazy thing. And so that's that. Does that make sense? So don't beat yourself too much. Like, don't beat yourself up too much if you're following these proportions and these guidelines and all these like Instagram tutorials, and you're just not getting the results you want. You have to understand that at these like earlier stages where you don't have the confidence, is you have to learn a really solid foundation. And once you have a really solid foundation, then you start to play with it and you mess with it and you break it, because as you break it, you'll know what the underlying sense of things should be, if that makes sense. Right? It's almost, let me say it this way. The better you understand it, the better you can break it. Does that work? Right? So, um, and I bet this goes back to your eye point where you double your eyes over and you're like, I don't know why it doesn't look right. And that's almost definitely because you haven't drawn people enough that you can just feel it's in the wrong spot, and then you know how to put it into the right spot. That's because you've drawn 1,000 pairs of eyes, right? You'll just start to get the sense of where it should be. Like when I made this eye, and I put it over here, and it's a little too close to the center. I intentionally put it too close to the center. I can tell that it's too close to the center just by looking at it, right? And I need to go like a little more here. Oh, that's a little too high, right? Can you see these subtle changes I'm making? Right? I can tell that that's a little too, maybe a little down, and you have to kind of tweak it like about there, right? And that's the right spot, because I've drawn literally thousands of anime faces that you just kind of get this sense of where things are supposed to go. And that's probably what's happening with your eyes is you don't have that a strong intuition yet, just because you haven't done enough practice. And so don't be hard on yourself. Be nice. Keep practicing, and with time you'll start to get that sense of where the eye should go. Now, general rules, and you'll see these all over the place, is there should be about one eye. I'll say it myself. There should be about one eye between the eyes, and maybe like about half an eye to the sides. A third to half an eye, depends, because you might have really like these are long eyes, right? So this is a very short distance over here. But that will generally put you in the right spot. You'll be pretty close if you follow the one eye width between the eyes and then a third to a half of the eye width between the side of the skull and the other eye. Good? Yeah, good. Okay, I know we've gone on a little tangent about anime eyes when I was going to be talking about turning humans into anime, but you know what? That's good. Eyes are anime, so the more you understand eyes, the more you understand anime, and you can take that to the bank. Yeah, where were we? Went on a bit of a tangent there. Big tangent. Right, okay, we were drawing in the dude's face. Buddy's face. Oh, I gave him the wrong eyes. Okay, here. Where were we? We were talking about the process. Okay, right, so, what is it? Circle. Good old circle, right? Same process. Circle, midline. Guys are about half circle, half jaw. Draw in your jaw, right? Just reiterating things here. Do your sort of midline here. Eyes go towards the bottom of this area. Then the nose is right at this junction. The mouth is in between the nose and the chin. Ear, ear. That's where we were, right? Perfect. Okay, cool. So back to our dude, right? We draw on some ears, bottom of the nose, top of the eyes, right? He has kind of small ear, or I guess they're sort of normal ears. Make fun of the guy's poor ears. And in anime, ears just have, oftentimes it's just like a little line here, a little curved line here, and then it just comes in. This changes quite a bit depending on the style. Like Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z tend to have like really big ears. Sometimes the ears are just this little shape like that. And that one you just got to kind of play with, personal preference. That's generally your ears. Now, at this point, we have the framework for our face, and we plot in the parts that sell us on the person's face. Right? So looking here, we see what's his big defining feature. It's this big tussle of hair, right? It kind of goes off to the side and does that. And we could probably just copy that right over. Right? Just slap it on. And for the most part, that'll kind of tell us that this is our dude, right? You can, and then you can play with it a little bit. You can go, well, his jaw should be maybe a little thinner, right? So let's bring his jaw in a little bit. He's got quite a narrow jaw. Got this real kind of, like it really, his cheeks really suck in. So we'll do that a bit. Let's bring his jaw in, right? Yeah, he's got kind of a long face, long jaw, and that's pretty close to our dude here, right? Again, anime is not something that needs to be like really precise. It's a very caricature, cartoony style. You're just looking for those big important elements to sell people on this is that person. In which case, his hair is like the huge giveaway. Big, big giveaway, right? He's got big, crazy hair and eyes are anime. So always check your hair and your eyes. So there's the hair. He has kind of a shape to his eyebrows. And with guys, you can do big eyebrows if you want, right? You do big fat ones, little thin ones, whatever you want. Let's do it like this. Bring these in a little bit. Draw on eyebrows. And a little more curve. But at this point, we kind of have our caricature of our fella here. He actually has a really strong, I believe it's called an epicanthic fold. So we'll put one of those in over top. Eyelashes, because everyone gets eyelashes in anime, because everyone's really pretty. That's how we do it, right? That is how you turn a human man into an anime character. And then he's got a t-shirt. Yeah. Really. Yeah. Right? And that's the process of turning a person into an anime character. I think that's not too bad. You can see the nose is much wider. Maybe we'll come in here. Again, don't be afraid to erase and to tweak. A lot of this is all about process. So again, bottom of the ears is our landmark. Let's make his nose a little wider. Right, that's probably a little closer. And he's got a really big lip, so maybe something like that. Not too bad, right? That's about right. Yeah. So there's from the front and then from the side. What do we start with? I'm going to sit here until someone says, what do we start with? Thank you. Beautiful circles. It's all about them circles. Circles, circles, circles. If you're not confident, draw a circle. And we'll even do this one without the guide just to... I thought the guide... Or do you find me drawing over the guides helpful? I thought they would help, as you can kind of see where things are being plotted in. It's good? Okay. As you can kind of see... Because I thought the idea would be you can kind of see where things are going to go. And so... because I imagined, when I remember myself learning, when you watch the process from the start, it's kind of hard to imagine how it all fits together because you don't see the end result at the same time. So I was hoping that would kind of get around that little issue. Anyway, moving on. Draw your circle. Put a line in the middle. Remember that of your overall length, guys are about half from the eyes up, and that is I forgot to mention that when I was doing the girls. Your guideline is from the center of the eyes. So like if we do this from the center of the eyes, right? And this is a third and this is a third. This is your length to the bottom of the jaw for a girl. Right? One more third generally. But because this is a dude, it's quarters. So we turn that 3 into a 4 and we do one of these down here. And then one of these down here. And look at that. That's right where his chin is. So, pardon? Yeah, these what I'm doing here, these are the general proportions that are going to work for maybe 70% of your characters. This will generally work for most people, right? If we go to our reference over here, the same holds true for human men that are not anime characters. We go to the top of the head, down to the jaw, right? If I go halfway, that's about, oh, it's about his eyes. Look at that. And then about halfway here, oh, that's about his nose. And then in between these two lines, about his mouth. That's because anime men tend to follow like natural proportions. It's the girls that really get weird. And that's why I spent so much time talking about the girls, because it's so much different from human proportions. Because if I turn this off and I go back to our women, our females, right? Her head goes about here to about here. If I go halfway on this line, right, I'll just turn her off. We go halfway, that's about there, right? And we know they're halfway about there, and that should, in theory, be her mouth, right? This should be her mouth, her nose, her eyes, and I bet you they line up pretty close, right? Women are, of course, because women are less, let's say, strong-featured as men. This gets pulled up a little bit, right? And you can see that difference in the female head of anime is this lower half is smaller. And that's because women just have smaller jaws than men, right? But you can see in a real human being that these differences are much less pronounced. Whereas in a anime character, it's huge. And that's because, back to this drum that I'm banging incessantly, anime is ultimately cartoon and caricature. So you're taking features and you're emphasizing them and making them more pronounced and just taking it to a much higher level than you would if you were doing realistic drawing. So women are vastly different in anime than, well, not vastly, but they're much more extreme caricatures than male anime characters, because we're really pushing the cuteness of the girl characters, right? So really small jaws, really small mouths, really big eyes, right? Almost like, I bet you if I put like a child's proportions here, you would see that like an anime, like a grown anime female character's proportions are really similar to like a 7-year-old actual girl. But this is not the case with men. Men have really similar features. So back to our friggin' circle here, and then we want them sides. Oh no, that's the female. We want male from the side. We had just established the proportions where we went from the eyes. We broke it up into these quarters, not thirds, because it's a dude. And so about here, base of our nose. In between here and here is our mouth. You can usually go a little higher than the mid for men, but again, these are the things you can play with over time. Like our guy over here actually has a rather short distance between his nose and his chin. He got a big old nose. Kind of part of why I picked it, because I want to show with a big nose. So we want his, because we got a big schnoz. Comes down pretty hard. And it's got kind of a roundness to it. And then we come into our lips. Kind of a round jaw. And bring that in to this area here. One of the defining features of male jaws is you can kind of put this point to them, right? Like a hard edge at the corner of the jaw. I think that's called the masseter. Don't quote me. Whereas don't do masseters on female characters as much. You just want to kind of suggest it's there, because girls have very soft jaws. You can usually just do like a curved line for girl jaws, just a simple soft line. And he's got a big old nostril, but this is anime, so we're just going to put a little line there. And he looks just pissed off. Jesus. Guy needs to take a break. And then we can follow the general line of his brow. Again, male characters, you can really follow the features of their face, and it's not going to cost you too much in anime. You're just going to have to make sure the eyes look like anime eyes, and then you pretty much can just draw his face like I could just, give him one of these and it would still kind of look anime, right? And don't go too hard though, because if you really put him these features, suddenly it starts to look like a Disney character, because Disney tends to do a less exaggerated version than anime, or the, I guess, Western cartoons, right? Back to his brow, you can see there's this kind of shape to it. If we really push the elements, we're going to just do a light one, right? Just a light one, because anime is very subtle. His brow shape is like that. Pretty classic brow. Nothing special about him. So we'll lay that in. It's kind of low because he's someone pooped in his cornflakes, so he's just not having a good time. I don't know why they mess with his cornflakes, but I assume his name is Bradley, is just not having it today. He's having a horrible day. Same thing with the eyes. With guys, they're smaller eyes, but you still have that same kind of shape, like this, right? That sort of like, kind of reminds me of a Dorito right now. Yeah, it kind of looks like a Dorito. Just a chip shape almost. And so you do your chip, and then plot in the eye. And our ear in here. He has a pretty normal ear, so we'll just plot that in. And then we pretty much have our dude. That's it. I don't know how fat his neck is or isn't. We're just going to give him a regular neck. Just a normal dude neck, right? And that's Not too bad. Not too bad. I think we could bring the chin in a little bit. Right? His chin's a little shallow, maybe a little rounder. Make his nose a little rounder. Of course, once you lay out the general stuff, you can start playing with it. Like, you know, if I want to like really give him a schnoz, right? You can do that. You can also turn it down a bit. Really depends how much you want it to look like the person, how much you're just using the reference. That part's all up to you. And then his hair. This is on which layer? This layer. Let's turn that off. Into his hair. He's got this kind of coif thing going on, and then it just comes back. And he has a pretty short sideburn, it looks like, so we can just give him that kind of coif. Come up. Right? And just do the general stuff. I don't know what his hair... It's all black there, so I have no idea what his hair is doing. I assume he has one of those Jedi braids. That is, yeah, that's Anakin Skywalker. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Hey, wait a minute. I don't know this guy. Yeah. But there you go. So we just drew Hayden Christensen, and that's pretty fun. But therein is the general process of drawing anime characters from human characters. And I think, well, let's stop there and ask, is that all making sense? Do we have our pieces to practice with? Okay, good. Oh, I went way over, but I'm not too concerned about that. It's more important you guys got all the pieces. Those times are more of a guideline. And then I suppose I should talk about bodies, but honestly, bodies are really simple. You can like almost do like just copy and paste of the bodies, and it's fine. One thing I will stress again, I've mentioned this in a prior lesson, is that when you draw anime, I know I've been saying this over and over and over, it's a cartoon. It's a caricature, and it draws a lot of its inspiration from being animated. And so don't get too detailed. Right? You want to when you're like not sure what to do, you want to imply more than you want to straight up tell somebody what the piece of the body is, right? Like for instance, the great example is always the hands. I sketch out, like, we'll do a real human hand here. So we're gonna do this, right? Block it out. We'll do the knuckles. Block it out. Right? This is gonna be like just a hand. It's just here. This is kind of, I don't know why I'm drawing it in this weird position. Let's do it out like this. Right? Block is way too small. And I gotta draw a hand here to show the process. Yeah, I know. Thank you. Okay. There's our guide. So if I were to make this a realistic human hand, we're going to focus on this section here because that's really where we can talk about it, is I would like put in a knuckle, right? And another knuckle. And then I have to do like these. And her eye, right? There. And you have to show how these are two different fingers, right? And you draw both parts of the finger. It's all there. All there. Put in the finger. Finger. I know there's a lot of fingers, right? And what's the difference between this hand and an anime hand? Well, the anime hand has less stuff on it. That is not my eraser. Yeah, so usually you'll just cut out the nails altogether. So let's get rid of that, right? Get rid of the nails. Already looking more anime, right? We don't have these lines. They don't put the knuckle lines on there, right? nails are gone. So already this looks a little more anime. We probably don't have these lines either, right? Maybe you do like one. But then also, they'll do this. Where you'll just cut out lines altogether. And this can be done all over the human body. You can cut out lines where there's like an arm over top of, say, a chest or something. You can just erase some of it, because when you're doing animation, when you're this is like, has to go on a bit of a little bit of a tangent, but it's one that helps people draw anime. Is if you study animation a little bit, you'll know and learn that you don't have to put all the detail into every frame. You just have to put enough detail that people can follow the movement, right? Because of like these fingers are eventually going to, let's say they're going to curve in, right? We're going to just come in like that, because I'm going to make like a Spider-Man hand or something. Because you have this big shape here, and it's slowly going inward, you don't need to emphasize that there's two fingers here, because my brain is going to fill in that space for me, right? Because I see this general shape and I know this is a hand. My brain's going to go, well, because this is a hand, there's obviously 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers, right? I'm going to do the work. And so because animation is a very time-consuming art, you're doing like, 20 to 30 frames per second, you have to draw a lot of hands to sell 1 second of animation. I'm going to cut as many corners as I can to make the process cheaper for my studio, right? And just save my wrist in the process. And so that's where a lot of the anime style comes from, is thinking about how you can tell people what they're looking at with less. And this comes back like their faces. The noses are almost non-existent. The mouths are almost non-existent. There's like very like low amounts of features actually on the character. And that's true of the entire body in anime, even though when you do the actual body, you can follow more accurate lifelike proportions. You're still going to pull back on the detail. Same with feet, same with abs, same with chests. Like you could also think of, like this is one you see a fair bit. Like if I draw, say like a chest, we'll do a female chest, right? And she's got there, abs, whatever. I'm not too concerned about that part. Right? Block in the breasts. Whatever. I am going to say draw, like you would just do really simple lines. There's like a hint of the clavicle, and then you could just draw a breast kind of like that. And then this one just has the side. I'm not doing the full thing and all the muscle and the meat. I'm not. You just put in a couple lines implying that it's there. And that's how most anime works, is you just kind of pick the most important line, and that's how you sell it's a cartoon and a caricature, even though this doesn't actually tell you that much information by itself. Like these 3 lines, I just do that over here, and that's the entire image. You have no idea what you're looking at. But because there's a shoulder over here, and the bottom of a bicep, and a hip, your brain's going to go, oh, okay, that's a breast, right? Even though I'm not doing the full line, I am not putting in nipples or the sides of the pec. I am just putting in as little as possible. And that's one of the ways you can sell an anime style while drawing human references, is pulling back on the detail and being very specific about the lines you choose to use. And that's pretty much it as far as turning human beings into anime. It's 80% face, probably more. And then of the face, when you're doing faces, it's like 80% eyes and hair. And that's it. Any questions? Okay, did we learn something? Okay. Well, that goes back to the so why you're going to find it challenging when drawing human bodies as anime goes back to those points I was making regarding placement of the eyes. Because what's happening is if you're not sure what to simplify, it's probably because you're not very confident about the actual structure of the human body. Because it's just the craziest thing for how this works is if you learn how to draw a really, say, detailed human chest, right? Where I come in and I know that this is a deltoid. It connects here. And then you have this little, I don't remember the name of this muscle, but there's one here, and then you have a tricep, and then you have a bicep, right? And they lock in like this, then there's a brachioradialis, and then this connects here, and then there's a side of the pec, and the pec goes like this, and then the breast hangs off the pec like that, right? And here's the latissimus dorsi, and over here is the part of the teres, then you have the serratus, and I'm just going on and on, rib cage, right? I know all these things. And then you have your abs, belly button, right? There's a pelvic bone here, then you have the top of the quad, right? Because I know all these things, I know what the important parts are that I have to tell people, the things I have to tell people, or they will not see a human body. And so if you're like having trouble with these things, or like, I don't know what to simplify, get really good at what you're trying to simplify. Because the better you understand it, the more you'll know. Like here's a great, I think it was a quote from Einstein. And he said, if you can't explain something to a 5-year-old, you don't fully understand it. And that's essentially what's happening here. If you really understand the human body, you'll know how to simplify it into its core essential elements. In this case, it's visual, right? And so because in my case, I have a very strong understanding of the human body and its components and how it all fits together, I know how to simplify it to its core elements. And so if you're having a hard time deciding what the important line is when you simplify, it's probably because you just don't understand what you're trying to simplify enough. Does that make sense? Good. Okay, well, I think that's the end of the lecture. We're kind of in the question phase here. So if you got any questions, hit me.